So I started out my career at M&C Saatchi in London, and it was 30 people when I started and about 350 people when I finished. And what I learned there was that it was really very much how to brand something up and the power of a brand. And that was sort of true of the people that had the name on the front door right the way through to the work that we did with our clients. And when I was kind of lucky enough to set up a digital division within M&C Saatchi in London, which I then tried to take to New York. And while I was in New York, a couple of things happened. One, I'm trying to set up a digital dot-com-y business about exactly the same time that the dot-com crash happened, which was challenging. I think the day I arrived in New York, 2,000 people got laid off at Ogilvy, and that was the start of like a whole load of people in advertising getting made redundant. And then unfortunately, about 3 or 4 months after I got there, September the 11th happened. So I had this kind of really amazing journey, and I had a really good time in New York, despite all of this. But probably the September the 11th thing made me kind of slightly question what it was that I was doing. You know, what was my job and what was my role in life? And so my Australian wife, who is up there in the top right-hand corner with my now two children, we decided that we'd go traveling and go and see a bit of the world and sort of try and understand how the world was working outside of the bubble that was the world of advertising. And so we went to Central and South America, and we saw all sorts of really interesting things from an environmental perspective, but also a social perspective. And I got to Australia, and I decided I'm not going to get back into advertising. Well, I might just get back into advertising for a while just to pay the bills, but in the end, I'm not going to get back into advertising. And for some bizarre reason, don't ask me why, but I ended up buying a block of land in Queensland and planting 10,000 eucalypt trees, because I thought, that's my giving back to the world. So I'll work in advertising and I'll watch my trees grow, and it will all be okay. It's all going to be fine. But reality struck, and I realized I needed to somehow pay for these trees. And so I was lucky enough to join a place called Bellamy Hayden, which, for those that don't know it, is a media strategy company. And it was the first time I'd kind of been in media as opposed to being in advertising. So I'm sure there's a lot of people here in the advertising marketing world. So it was a really interesting time for me, because I was in Australia, which I thought was going to be for a couple of years. 12 years later, here I am standing in front of you talking about my experiences. And Bellamy Hayden was sort of, a really interesting place that was trying to break the rules around media and trying to do things differently with taking big advertising budgets and trying to put them into really interesting, connected sort of places where people were actually really living their lives outside of television and newspapers. And I was, again, lucky enough this time to go to Melbourne and run the Melbourne office of Bellamy Hayden for a period of time. And while I was there, I studied at the Centre for Sustainability Leadership. And that was me kind of bringing together that sort of, the sense that there's more to life than just making ads for people, and kind of just opportune being in the right place at the right time around a really amazing bunch of people who were teaching and going through this course, this leadership course. And it was a 9-month program, and I sort of got through the 9 months, as well as sort of running this Melbourne office of Bellamy Hayden, and then literally within 3 months I quit my job and came back to Sydney, and with a business partner set up a business called Republic of Everyone, which was, I guess, if you like, the culmination of that doing good, purpose-driven stuff and working in advertising and communications and really enjoying the strategic and the creative side of that, but not really knowing how I could do the good bit within that. So, and Republic is and has been really successful. It was a really interesting 5-year journey, trying to work out how do you embed sustainability and responsibility in a business context. How do you create do good businesses, if you like. And I, about a year ago, sold out of that business, and then about 5 or 6 months ago joined Ikon with a small sojourn in as a client, which was really good fun. But I wanted to kind of get back into a mainstream business again after being kind of in a niche area for quite a long time. And so Ikon is going to be sort of some of the foundation of kind of what I'm going to talk to you about today is some of the thinking that I've been doing over the last 5 months in the context of that business. But it's drawing on all of those other things that I was sort of telling you about. And one of the other sort of final pieces, as Vince mentioned, is that I just recently stepped up to take on kind of chair CEO role of Conscious Capitalism Australia. And I'm going to talk a little bit, probably going to butcher a very clever person's presentation for you. It will be amazing, and it will be captured on video as well. It would be even better. But I'm going to talk to you a bit about that and how that sort of fits into the picture. As I said, it's not all work. It's also, I've also got, wife and children, my trees, and a tractor, which a Smurf seems to be driving. And for those of you can see that, and I am also an Arsenal fan. Are there Arsenal fans here? No. Just Tottenham fans. Okay. So I'm going to start off with kind of a sort of a fact that may not make a lot of sense to anyone that doesn't work in media, but I'm going to kind of try and make all of this as relevant as I can to all of you. But I guess if you work in the world of advertising or media or marketing at the moment, you'll know that it's really tough to cut through in the marketplace. To get your message out into the marketplace has become harder and harder. And to get noticed is really challenging. And at the same time, yet we sort of still seem to pour millions and millions of dollars into this thing that we hope is going to make our brand famous and make us famous, or make our products famous. And we think that's a really interesting kind of conundrum. Like, why is that happening, and what is the reason for it? And one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why this is happening is because media dollars are being fragmented. They're being broken up into smaller and smaller slithers to feed more and more niches and more specializations across the communication spectrum. And all of that's really fantastic if you're a specialist working in your particular area. But for clients, it becomes really challenging because it makes your job much more complicated, and you're much less assured in your own mind that you're doing the right thing, because every single person who comes to talk to you has got a different point of view on what it is you should be doing. So it's a really challenging place for marketeers and clients. In the good old days, when I was back at M&C Saatchi, it was pretty simple. You'd get up in the morning, probably late because you'd have a hangover. You'd go into work and have a bit of a chat with everyone. And then at some point you'd go and see your client, and your brief was, get on TV. If you can't get on TV, get onto cinema. If you can't do that, newspapers or outdoor, and don't come back if you get on radio. It was as simple as that. Everyone wanted to be on TV. Everybody wanted to do a big ad. And it was actually quite possible in those days, because in reality, there wasn't much more. There was like 3 types of milk, maybe 4 or 5 different types of bread, 5 newspapers, this is England, and 4 TV networks that ran advertising. Actually, 2, probably 3 maybe. So it was a pretty straightforward business in many ways. You could get your brand out there and reasonably famous relatively easily, or so we thought. But the world has, I've been out of media for a little while. I was at Bellamy Head, and then I had my break in the middle working in my own business, which wasn't really in the media mix. And then I've come back into Ikon, which is a media agency again. And I actually thought, when I saw things like this, what have I done? This is a nightmare. Because I'd gone from a world where it was pretty straightforward and there were basically five things to do, to a world which looks a bit like this. I can't even explain to you what any of these things are. But they are part of the media mix. Our business is working with some or many of these different tools, these different data points, these different ways of bringing audiences and brands together through multiple touch points, multiple channels, whether that be mobile or multiple screen or even more traditional channels and social media and the whole mix. It's a really complicated and challenging environment to be operating in, particularly when you kind of marry that up with an ever-reducing marketing budget and more and more choice. Bain, I think it was Bain and Co. did this study. They do this study for a number of years, which looks at complexity in business. And what they've found in their study is that complexity is the biggest killer of business. That there's 15% of businesses that they've studied over this period of time that have been successful, consistently successful on a relatively straight journey without the peaks and troughs that almost every other business goes through. And they figured out that the businesses that have that nice, smooth kind of growth curve without all the peaks and troughs are the businesses that find focus. And there was another person who was very good at focus. And when Tim Cook took over as CEO from Steve Jobs, and after Steve Jobs had died, somebody asked him, what was the one thing you learned from Steve Jobs? And he said, I learned focus. Focus is the key. And so that's really, I think, a really interesting kind of thought, because in marketing and in advertising, marketeers, brands are entering a really challenging time where the consumer, the customer, the people that you're trying to sell to, i.e. you and me, are just absolutely armed with the most incredible amounts of knowledge and information and an unprecedented choice, whether it be how you read your news, how you get your news every day, through to, I often go into a supermarket and look at the cereal aisle, and it looks like a library now. Have you noticed that? It doesn't look like a cereal aisle anymore. It's just a library of cereals, and you have to read all of the packs to kind of work out which cereal it is that you should have, which is the better for you. So there's unprecedented choice. And what's happened is that people have become, I'm sure no one's going to disagree with this, I'm hoping, please don't if you do, is that we've entered a period of heightened intolerance, huge amounts of impatience, and complete indifference. And that's happened because we are living in a world where it's really easy to get stuff that we want. Technology has made it so simple for us to buy the things that we want to buy, find the things that we want to buy, and then buy them. We've got mobile. I remember Optus when I first arrived here. It was actually quite pleasurable to phone them up and know that you were going to have at least half an hour's argument with them. And it was kind of a sport. You knew that if you're going to talk to Optus, you were going to have an argument. And I'm picking on Optus, sorry if anyone's here from Optus. It didn't matter which telephone company it was, you're going to have a fight with them. But now, technology has just made that conversation really easy. They've actually looked at it from the other way, from the customer point of view, and just used really smart algorithms and bits and bytes to smooth out that hurdle or that friction point in the conversation around customer service. And that's happening across the retail spectrum. That's happening in every sector, in every category, that it's so much easier and smoother to deal with businesses now. And also, this idea of impatience, we get really annoyed when that screen goes down. Do you know how slightly annoyed I got because it did that? Not thinking that, hang on a minute, how's that work? How's that actually happening? That is a normal thing for us to do, wirelessly presenting on a really big screen. But yet, we're very quick to just get very used to that technology and that innovation, and then get really annoyed when it doesn't quite work for you when you need it. So that's one kind of sort of intolerance and impatience. And the other kind of intolerance and impatience is if you want to get the latest fashion out of London or New York. In the old days, you kind of go, well, I'll wait for a holiday back to London or New York, and then I'd get the stuff then. Or a friend will bring it over, or maybe I can mail order it and it will take 3 months after it's got through customs. But today, you can get items that are in New York in 3 or 4 days on normal post. It's really fast. and really simple. So expectation has now gone through the roof. Customer expectation has gone through the roof, and the need for brands to respond to that has never been greater. And at the same time, people are filtering and ignoring and avoiding the messages that they don't want to hear, which frankly are most of the messages that marketeers try and push out. And not only that, they've got the technology to do it. So Foxtel give us IQ, and we can use IQ to filter advertising. And there's a number of other things going on as well that are really interesting. So many of you in this room will be in this bracket. I, on the other hand, will be in the next slide bracket. But today, young people that have kind of been born with access to digital technology, the internet, are better educated, better informed, and better connected with big global ideas than ever in history. We all know that. What I didn't know, though, was this fact, which you may have seen. It is on YouTube. It is on TED, so you may well have seen this. But one of the speakers at the Conscious Capitalism conference the other day talked about this, which is that our IQ is increasing by 3% every year. Not if you're born, but if you are born in that moment, your IQ is likely to be 3% greater than your parents. And this is an amazing quote, that if you had the average IQ today in 1890, you were a genius. Whereas today, if you had a high IQ from 1890, today you would be probably in some sort of special needs group, or you'd need some help. I'm slightly exaggerating, but you wouldn't be very clever. So you've got all these really smart, bright young people, and at the same time, we've got, for the first time in history, and this happened in America in 1989, that there were more 40-year-olds than under 40-year-olds. So in history, that's never happened before, where there were more old people. This is developed society, and now it's a global phenomenon. So we've got this aging of the population, which might be seen as a negative in some ways, but actually it's incredibly positive. And there's a really interesting thing that seems to be going on, and I'm not going to claim I'm some psychologist. I have read this on the internet on a few different sources and a couple of books, so I could be wrong, but I'm going to go with it. But there is a theory that because the society is maturing and aging, and the natural process of getting to your midlife is that you probably have a midlife crisis, and then after you've had your midlife crisis, you start to think, what can I do about my midlife crisis? And so you look for meaning and purpose. You look for the things in life that you really actually find inspiring, and you think are things you should spend your time doing, rather than worrying about how much money you're making, or how big your house is, or what car you've bought. And at the same time, this new younger generation, at the same time, younger people have sort of almost leapfrogged the need for these things in Maslow's hierarchy of need, that it's no longer a rite of passage to buy a car and get your freedom. You don't bother doing that anymore. No one needs to get a car to get their freedom. There's other choices, and there's other ways of doing it. Your freedom comes from your mobile phone and the internet. You probably can't afford a house, so you're not really bothered about buying a house and getting a mortgage, which means you've got to get an incredibly well-paid job to pay for it. So there's sort of this closing of the gap in society between young and older sectors, and this general sort of maturing of a mindset, which is not. I mean, still, you go to the King's Cross on a Friday night. It hasn't changed that much, but there are some fundamentals that are kind of pillars in society that are changing. It wasn't that long ago in society, I'm talking globally here, that we had apartheid in South Africa, or child slavery, which obviously some of these things still exist today, but it was on mass scale. These things, there's all sorts of freedoms that have been that have come into society in recent times. And society is certainly on a trajectory of bettering itself in terms of the way in which it sort of operates and sees itself. So sort of general search for meaning and purpose. And so how have brands responded to that? Well, this is a bit of a long thing to read. So it's essentially a piece of research that which was done with a fair few number of clients for a conference which was on a few months ago by the World Federation of Advertisers. And the research said that, you know, over the last 10 or 15 years, it's all been about climate change and carbon and these kind of really big issues that the world is facing. And business sort of took some of those things on and tackled them and did actually quite a good job in lots of cases at reducing their energy footprint and reducing their carbon emissions and recognising the responsibilities they had and the ways in which they could actually save lots of money by doing that. But now that a lot of those sort of projects have kind of gone through the system and they've done their payback periods, and you know we're now got locked in sustainability in lots of ways in terms of the organisations that that are operating. They're sort of starting to turn their attention now to more societal or purpose-driven issues that are also of equal importance. So what we can see is that not just in this research, but in lots of bits of research and lots of books and evidence from brands, a few of some of which I'll share with you, you can see that brands are starting to respond to this drive for purpose and drive for meaning by creating purpose within their own organisations and within their own businesses. And the reason why they're doing that is because, frankly, if you haven't got a purpose today, if you're a brand operating in the absence of any kind of purpose other than to sell this box of whitewashing powder or whatever it might be, you're pretty much lost. There is so much choice and so much sophistication and understanding in the consumer's mind that you really need to find a way of cutting through. And there really is only one way of cutting through, and that's finding focus. And the focus in terms of brand is purpose. Brands need to find a role. They need to provide a reason for somebody to choose them over the 10 or 20 other options in the market. And it needs to be a very good reason. So brands have sort of recognized this. They've seen the opportunity that identifying and finding purpose within their organizations, within their businesses, is providing them in terms of potential growth from sales perspective, respect, reputation, and fame. So this is where I start to do a bad job of doing what Raj Sisodia did a few weeks ago brilliantly when he came to Sydney. This shift to purpose, this kind of recognition that business and brands need to have more than just their products to connect with audiences in meaningful ways, is sort of captured in the idea of conscious capitalism. And conscious capitalism is founded on the idea that people see business as a bad thing generally, but business's reputation is on the decline and has been for a long period of time. It's kind of less respected. Big corporations are less respected today than they've ever been. And yet, when you look at actually what has capitalism done, if you just look at in sheer numbers, capitalism, so for millennia, for hundreds of thousands of years, or at least as far back as records began, people largely lived below the poverty line, largely lived on subsistence amounts of money. You know, it's hunter-gathering. It was a pretty tough existence. There wasn't really any opportunity to kind of fulfill your potential. And that was going on for hundreds of years, potentially thousands of years. But then there were some key moments. So 1750 was when the Industrial Revolution began, and 1776, The Wealth of Nations was written by Adam Smith. So Industrial Revolution happens, and very, very quickly, within 200 years, the rate of per capita income absolutely, and this is globally, absolutely catapults. So that people, not everyone at the moment, but sort of, in a foreseeable period of time, there will be a time when almost nobody is living below the poverty line. It doesn't mean everybody's going to be rich. It just means that people won't be living on $500 a year, that they will have a significantly more income, which means they have more freedom, which means they can go and do things that they couldn't have imagined of while they were trying to find food and keep themselves warm and healthy. But also that release of potential doesn't just help them as individuals, it helps society as a whole. And at the same time as all of that's happening, so capitalism as a force for good is going on, business is kind of operating still today on a model which was really designed in the Industrial Revolution, which is maybe not so much right now, but largely, the last 30 or 40 years, everything's been driven by the bottom line, by the quarterly report, by the profit margin. That if you're not successful there, then you're not successful. And that's a really narrow view of the world, a really myopic view of the world when you consider what that could look like. And the result of that view of the world is that actually most people hate their jobs. 20% of people are engaged in the work that they do. 40% are mildly engaged and the rest are completely disengaged, which means that they're actually actively working against your organisation. So that's not a really great scenario, is it, where you've got a whole bunch of people in your company who possibly don't want to be there, but they're not leaving, so they're staying and being disruptive. But can you imagine if you could turn that on its head and actually create a scenario where they want to be there, where actually being in getting up on Monday mornings, I think Raj has a great quote, a great stat that is, it's not that great actually, but there's a 20% increase in heart attacks on a Monday morning. And can you imagine if you could kind of stop that happening or reduce that? Wouldn't that be a good thing? So could we get to a situation where people actually are actively engaged, more people are actively engaged in your business and helping your business than disengaged? And it's not, and this kind of comes out because actually when you think of how much better educated and connected and responsible and conscious we are in society today as individuals, if you just think about our own personal evolution, it's sort of, that's all happening in society, but it's not necessarily happening inside the business environment, because when you get into the business environment, it becomes about, well, have we hit our quarterly report? And people kind of leave their values a bit at the doorstep because they know they're in business and they're in work now and they have to do the work thing. But actually, imagine if we could take all of those values and that consciousness and bring that into the workplace. And you might think that sounds like a really crazy idea from some sort of hippie ideology, which it kind of is. But there are examples around the world and now in Australia, and this is a great example. Whole Foods, for those of you that don't know, is a supermarket chain in America, which has was started on the premise of can we build a business based on love? Which I do feel a little bit uncomfortable with being an Englishman saying that, but it's true. Like, imagine if you could build a business that was about the joy of being in that business, because it was built on a higher purpose, which wasn't just about making money. It was about solving problems, creating opportunities, giving, in this case, it's about making available high quality food to more people. So that was their mission and that was their purpose. They did really interesting things, like they had a declaration of interdependence, which is they absolutely recognise that they, as a business, only succeed. And this came from when they first started, it was in the early 70s, they first started the business, just one store in some town in America. And then there was a huge flood, and the whole store got completely flooded out. All their stock was washed out. And they kind of thought, well, that's it. We owe the bank loads of money. We owe our suppliers loads of money. We're bust. We're going to have to close down. And they found that their staff arrived in the morning and started to clear up. And then slowly but surely, their customers started arriving because they loved this brand so much that they didn't want it to kind of go away. And they helped them clear the shop out and get their stock back in order. And they spoke to their suppliers, who they owed lots of money to, and said, look, this is what's happened. Can you help us? And their suppliers said, we believe in your business because of the values that you've got and we share. We'll help you. So they gave them extended lines of credit. They got back on their feet and they kept going. And now they're a really successful business. They did other things, like they recognized that the gap between the CEO's salary and the lowest paid person in the organization is a really important factor. In fact, if you sort of like the conscious businesses are the ones that have the smallest gap between best paid and least paid or average salary. And so they set a rule, which is that nobody will be paid more than 19 times anyone else in the company, or 19 times the average salary in the company. And I think the CEO, I think he's still the CEO, John Mackey, but I think he earned $100,000 a year, which was kind of crazy when you consider that people in his position in most other companies are earning millions and millions of dollars normally for businesses that are not actually succeeding. Often they're losing share, they're losing market. And there's a whole bunch of other things here. 100% salary transparency. This is not such a good one if you work in marketing, which is 80%, Angela, 80% lower spend on marketing. So, what this means is that businesses that kind of adopt this kind of way of working are actually connecting with people in completely unique ways that don't rely on advertising and traditional media. So this is really interesting, I think, as a marketing person, as in working in the brand space. And you might think, well, these businesses are giving away so much of their money and they're being so generous, and they must be losing money, or surely they're not making as much money as companies that are just whipping people and carrot and stick and kind of mechanical approach to treating people. But no, in fact, actually, they're hugely successful businesses, and it isn't just. This is a piece of research that's been done by Raj on a number of businesses, and the data comes from his study. But amazing returns on investment. And what they identified that these kinds of businesses have are 4 tenets, or 5 tenets. The first is that they start with a higher purpose, or not just start with, but they find a higher purpose. So this isn't about you have to be a new company. You just need to find your purpose. And that purpose needs to be above and beyond the profit that you make. That you can only be successful if you are as strong as the parts around your business, the cogs and the spokes and the wheels that help you operate as a business. So your stakeholders, whether they be your employees or your shareholders or your supply chain or the community at large, these people have a stake in your business one way or another. And the more you can connect with them and help them be more successful, they will pay you back over and over again. I think there's a quote about if you fill their shopping basket, they will fill yours many times over. So it's this idea that you be generous. You be generous with everyone, and you will get paid back. And the third piece is around creating a culture built on a set of values that you believe in, that are strong values that you live and breathe throughout your organisation in everything that you do. And then in order to kind of make those values become a reality, you need conscious leadership. So the people within the organisation in positions of leadership need to demonstrate and deliver and bring to life those values and create that culture. So they're the kind of the component parts, a very simplified version. It's much more sophisticated than I've made it sound, but it's a very clever piece of thinking, which has got some empirical evidence that sits behind it, and well worth reading Raj's book. There's a couple of books, Conscious Capitalism and Firms of Endearment is the other book, which is also worth a read. So we're kind of probably quite familiar with brands that have a purpose or have created a purpose and found their purpose. So Nike is a great example of a brand that, for as long as I can remember, it was always about the superstar athlete. It was always about you know, Tiger Woods and Lance Armstrong and all these amazing people, these superheroes. And then one day, they both fell over in most spectacular ways. They actually weren't superhumans. They were just normal human beings. And Nike took a look at that, I think, and went, what does that mean about, you know, what does that mean for us? Like, we're pinning our business and our ambitions on these characters who are fallible. And actually, is that the right thing to do anyway? Because what are we as a business? What are we as a brand? And they've invented, or created, I should say, out of their core, out of their very essence, out of where they came from, the just do it ideology, a new articulation of that around your inner greatness, so you as an individual. And what Nike actually does is it makes all of us feel like we're superheroes rather than us wanting to be like the superhero. Because, you know, even if you're a slightly overweight kid running down a street in the Midwest of America, you are doing a great thing because it's about you as an individual. And equally, we know the Dove case study really well, I'm sure. This is one of the original parts of the main campaign they did quite a few years ago now, but the more recent campaign you may have seen is called Sketches. Has everyone seen Sketches? Yeah? Yeah. For those that haven't, I'll just quickly explain it. So they campaigned for real beauty. Cosmetics were all about this unattainable beauty, but actually Dove recognised that real women didn't like that, and actually they had a product that they did like and could be true to themselves. So it was this idea of the campaign for real beauty. The most recent example of how they brought it to life is they got an artist and a screen, an artist and a woman. And they asked the woman to describe herself to the artist. He couldn't see, or he or she couldn't see the woman. And he then drew what he heard. And then the artist, without seeing the woman, then got a friend of the woman would come in and describe the woman. And he then drew the picture. And they put the pictures up side by side. How does the woman feel about herself? How does her friend feel about her? And you can imagine that the picture of the person was this slightly derogatory version of herself, whereas the picture of their friend was this kind of actually quite normal human being. And it just dramatised this sort of idea in a really nice way. So, you know, again, it's not just about sort of a nice ad like that. It's actually living this ethos all the way through the organisation. They set up, or certainly fund a charity which is about self-esteem. So they're kind of really putting their money where their mouth is all the way through the line. IBM was a computer company that made plastic boxes that sat on desks, and then it basically didn't do that very well anymore and got sold to a Chinese company, and then they went, well, what are we? And what they actually were was they had all this technology all around the world that was all connected up and joined up, and they had the best assets than any other technology company. And they realized that if you could connect up like that, you could make things smarter. So they just came up with this idea of how could we make the planet smarter. So again, it's a really nice positioning, and again, brought to life in lots of things that they're doing around how they're making the health system better, or the traffic networks better, or transportation systems better, distribution systems better. So we've got all this innovation going on, all this amazing kind of stuff, technology, clever creative thinking, innovation, ideas, a much cleverer brain in our heads, and more connected, educated young people and old people who smoke cigarettes in front of their 100th birthday cake. And yet, in the industry that I'm working in again now, the world is a bit stuck. It's a bit locked into a model which was invented 30 or 40 years ago and hasn't really been able to evolve very much. It doesn't mean that they're not doing anything or nothing's happening. Of course, there's lots happening. You saw that chart earlier on. There's a lot of stuff happening in this space. But still, as an industry, we're obsessively focused on acquisition and share of voice. So for those of you that aren't marketers in the room, you will probably just be familiar with the idea of brands shouting at you on TV, trying to get your attention without any real story or relevance to you. You know, it happens on radio, and it happens on the internet, it happens on almost any place where an ad can be placed. You're being communicated to all the time. And that's this idea of, if you can just talk to lots and lots and lots of people, then something good will happen. You might buy something. And it's an idea that worked really well when there was only 3 TV stations or 2 newspapers or a few magazines. It worked pretty well then because we didn't really have much choice. We had to absorb this. In fact, it was actually pretty good to have that stuff because it coloured up, it made the bland interesting, it put colour into the black and white. It was actually quite entertaining between the TV shows or around the news. So advertising had a really great role to play, and acquisition and share of voice, the measure that we've always sort of used, reach and frequency goals and things like that, that worked really well. But really, it seems crazy that even in today's world, we're still operating in a model which needs to talk to all of us in order to get to the individual. You kind of wonder why that is. And what that leads to is this sort of push mentality, this consumer in the middle. We just shove messages down the pipe until one of them sticks. It's about acquiring more and more people. It's about people as receptors of information. We'll give you a message and you'll take that message and do something with it. It's about broadcast first. It's about start with broadcast and then worry about everything else afterwards. But this doesn't reflect where we are. It doesn't reflect how we live our lives or what we do or where we go, where we get our information, where we get our entertainment, how we connect with each other. It's at odds with the world that we live in. And not only that, but customers really don't, and people don't differentiate between different channels and different communication touch points when they think about a brand. They just think about a brand and what that brand means to them, what purpose it has in their life, what role it plays in their life. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Does it do the job I want it to do or not do the job I want it to do? And then in terms of touch point and channel, you don't sit there and think, oh, that's really great ad on TV, and I'll kind of put up with the experience that I'm getting on my mobile phone, which is really crap because they didn't think it through properly, or on my iPad. That's okay though, because it's coming through the internet, so it's fine to be pretty average. People don't think like that. People just have an experience of a brand, and it's got to be good consistently all the way through every touch point and every channel. Because, and this is a piece of research that's, again, Millward Brown, their ad reaction research from 2014, half the time people are actually using another screen when they're watching TV these days. We're probably all quite familiar with that. You're texting, you're tweeting, you're looking at some other piece of information or content or entertainment in the, while the ads are on because we don't want to watch the ads. Or actually, we don't find the program that interesting, so we're on another device doing something else. So it's kind of amazing that we're in this, this situation in this world. It's actually really exciting in many ways. But really all that matter in the end is brand purpose and brand experience. That's all that really counts, not which channel it came through or who's producing the content or what type of content. It's the blending together, the blurring between channel and content. The message and the medium have, by and large, become one. And so an industrialized approach to creative production and an industrialized approach to mass communications in media really is not going to cut it. And in fact, there was a really good piece in Ad News recently, this week actually, which talked, PwC had done a study on media dollars and where they're being spent, asking clients. It was a piece of client research that they did. And I think it was something like 30% of clients' spend today is on owned media. And what I mean by that is their own channels. So their websites, their social media platforms, their own stores, their shops, all their own touch points. That's where they're spending 30% of their budget. And not only that, but that is a trend that is going to increase. So there's another piece of research by a guy, the head of DDB in Asia Pacific, writing in Mumbrella, I think that was, or maybe Ad News too, where he was saying every year our clients demand 8% reduction in our fees. So that means that we have, and their overall budget. So that means that 8% every year, year on year, 5-6 years' time, there isn't going to be much money left in advertising as a industry because clients recognise that the world has shifted. It's just at the moment they're a bit nervous about kind of going there. So it is happening and it is coming. If we think about what the current status quo is, it's rigid. We operate by demographics. We talk about ABs and socioeconomic data factors. And that data is driven by self-reported historical data. Somebody's filled in a form and a very long, sophisticated book of questions 6 months ago, and that's supposed to tell you how I'm thinking today or what I do tomorrow or where I might spend my money or get my entertainment. We talk about brand positioning. So flag in the sand, this is what we're all about. You come to us, we don't change, we've got matching luggage, everything looks the same. That's who we are, which was again kind of good 10 years ago, but the world has moved on a bit. We still talk about reach and frequency in media terms. For those of you that don't necessarily understand that language, it kind of makes sense. It's about how many people we reach, and it's about how many times we reach them. And that's a measure of success if we hit our RNF targets. But is that the right measure of success? Is just getting your message to enough people enough times going to do the job that we need it to do? It's very transactional and very much about trying to grab people's attention. If we were going to disrupt the market, what would you do? Well, we can be much more agile now because people are mobile. At least 10% of you in this room are currently tweeting or doing something with their mobile phones, probably bored and just doing your email, but I'll ignore that, that's okay, as long as you're doing a bit of tweeting too. But because of that, we're much more agile, because we have access to real-time data, and that data is rich and valuable, we can start to figure out people's behaviour. We don't have to rely on something that they told us 6 months ago, because we can actually see what they're doing on Twitter right now, or we can see what they're doing on our website right now. And increasingly, we've got clients, big shopping centre clients, I won't give their name away, but who are looking at technologies that can help you by logging into their system and rewarding you for doing that. They can help you find the things that you need, that help you navigate your way around their centre and their stores. And that data, once that data is coupled with credit card data and insurance data and all sorts of other data sources that we may have access as well as media data, suddenly this is a very, very powerful source of information that can be used to help us sell more stuff to people. The other thing that I think has shifted is that we've moved from brand positioning to brand purpose. And brand purpose is about responding to the needs of our audience, not focusing on their demographic profile or what postcode they happen to live in, but thinking about how they actually live their lives and how they think and feel. So it's about your brand responding to those different needs. It's about creating experiences around them. It's about building relationships, and it's about creating intention as opposed to just grabbing their attention. And if we look at it like that, we move from this outside-in model, transactional media model, to a much more of an inside-out, customer-first, consumer-first, audience-first, owned channel-first approach to thinking about how we connect and communicate with people. And we move through owned, earned, and borrowed channels. So owned is your owned assets, your website, your social media platforms. Earned is how people use your social media platforms to tell your story on your behalf, and their own story on your behalf. Borrowed is where we might sponsor something and build a relationship with a media property or a brand that we share the values of, and then we can leverage that relationship. And then you get to paid. Only then do you get to paid, as opposed to the other way around, which is kind of where we are at the moment, which is we start with paid. The job of marketing, Raj Sisodia talked about this in one of his presentations, that marketing is sort of bashed as this evil thing that goes out there and tries to make people buy things that they don't want. And I kind of used to think that way too. And to a certain extent it's true. But actually what marketing really should be is a service to the customer. That you are the voice of the customer. You are the group, the people in an organisation and outside an organisation that works out what it is the customer wants and then delivers that service to them against their needs. And so I think that's about sort of spinning this stuff on its head a bit and looking at it from a different view. And all of this is made increasingly more possible, not just by joining up marketing strategy and communication strategy, which is what we've always done, but actually joining it up through data. So that the marketing data, the customer data and the media data, if you like, are joined together, connected together, blended, stitched up, and insights are created out of that source of information. And those insights then go on to create even better, more rewarding, more engaging experiences for our audiences. And we can see, just in terms of some of the deals that are being done in the marketplace, that this stuff is absolutely fundamental. Big data is, you know, the phrase that everybody uses. I'm not sure everybody understands what it means, but you know, Woolworths buying a data analytics business, 50% ownership of a data analytics business. It does make sense for Woolworths to be doing that stuff, but it's really interesting that a retail brand is buying up consultancies and agencies in the data space to do this really clever data analytics and insight generation work. And then on top of that, you've got psychologists and advertisers working together, or even actually psychologists working in advertising in the case of Adam Ferrier, and writing and thinking about how behavioural economics actually works and how people respond to things, kind of system one thinking and system two thinking, that we are very simple creatures. We just respond to quite sort of emotional, we buy a lot of stuff on emotion and we post-rationalise it through rational thinking. That's how we operate as human beings. We just don't like to admit it. But like really figuring that out and figuring out how can you actually change people's behaviour by very simple tactics. So the New South Wales government here use nudge theory by, it's pretty mean actually, but what they do is if you got a ticket on your car, you used to get a ticket, it was a written ticket, everyone just threw it away and ignored it until the reminder came through, and eventually you might pay it 6 months later, which of course for a state government's bad because they need that money to put keep the lights on in the hospitals and things. So what they said was, how can we get people to pay faster? And the way they did it is they put a picture of your car on the ticket, and they put a stat which was 90% of people in your area pay their bills within 30 days. And the result was that they absolutely changed the revenue stream, because people thought, oh, actually, they've got a picture of my car, so they know who I am. There's no denying it. And not only that, but actually everybody around has paid their bill on time, so really I should too. So it's that, just again, looking at things from a different way, looking at things from a different angle and applying some logic to it. If we're going to do all this stuff, we're going to need some new metrics. I'm not going to go into that now. I'm not an expert on metrics. But we do need a different way of measuring success, which has to go beyond reach and frequency, has to go beyond just talking to lots and lots of people. If I think back to '96 when I started at M&C, as I said, marketing was very, very simple. It was advertising. And media was very, very simple because it was agency deals. You remember the champagne analogy I gave you earlier. But by 2014, by where we are today, really marketing is about purpose. Marketing is about what role this brand or this product plays in your life. And media is about experience. It's about how I connect with this brand or this product, how I engage with it, what it means to me, and what it does for me. How does it help me? And so if we're kind of living in that world, we need to think a bit differently to how we might think about how we use channels and connect with people. So, in an ideal world, what we want to do is, of course, we need to tell people about who we are and what we do and what we think. And of course, we entertain people and we inform people through content, through partnership deals and sponsorship deals, television programs, whatever it might be. But actually, increasingly, we need to start involving people in what we do and connecting with them in a different way. And ultimately, if you do that, we'll engage with them and make them understand what it is that's great about our business and our brand and our product over anyone else. And if we get that right, we will, through a number of different sort of touch points, we will bring the purpose of a brand to life in a much bigger and more meaningful way. So a few quick examples of brands that do this. Advertising is still going to be fundamentally important to the way in which businesses go to market. Creativity and design are going to be critical to the future of the way in which we connect and communicate with people. But we're going to have to deliver it in a new and unique way, because it's going to be too expensive just to keep running ads on TV, 30-second spots, hoping for the best. We need to think about how we make advertising engaging and interesting again, so people don't just IQ it and they don't try and walk past it and ignore it. That technology I forgot what was behind that content, right? Think. So technology like Google Glass is going to mean that content is going to become something that we need as brands. We're going to need to deliver in a timely fashion all the time, that we can't wait for the 30-second commercial to go on air and we've got all the matching luggage of posters and outdoor and shelf wobblers. That's not going to be enough. It's going to have to be real time, it's going to have to be relevant, it's going to have to be tailored. Not only that, but actually the most powerful advertising communication stuff that I've seen done, whether at Ikon, some of their case studies, and certainly other brands that you see like Uber, is that actually their advertising is their product. That the app, the tool, is their message. That the purpose is their advertising. And when you start to kind of tie all those things together, you suddenly have a very powerful story to tell. And then finally, brands like Nike have realized that actually they're more than just a sports brand, they're more than just a apparel manufacturer, they're actually part of an experience that we all, those of us that run and cycle and play golf or whatever it might be, we're having experiences and they are part of that experience. But at the moment previously they were just very much the shoe and the shorts and the t-shirt, but now they're not. Now they're actually part of using technology. They are a part of the experience in a much more meaningful and deep way that connects up us with them through technology. And if we get that all right, then you'll start to have a really interesting and deep and meaningful with your customers, I believe. And that is what customers are kind of looking for, because if you haven't got that purpose, if you haven't got that reason for being, and if you don't create those brand experiences, those media experiences, then it's easy to ignore you and easy to avoid you. And that's it, I think. Yes, and it didn't go down. So thank you.